A lot of talk about the filibuster as we look at the negotiation around all these big pieces of legislation. The West Virginia chapter of the Poor People's Campaign today is launching what it calls the Mass Moral Motorcade on Manchin. Group upset with Senator Manchin's stance on the filibuster.
We have to have mass moral action protests. We're headed back to West Virginia for a mass motorcade on Manchin. We cannot let one or two senators run this entire democracy into the ditch. And so it's time to stand up. It's time to fight back.
Join us now, one of the leaders of today's protest, the co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign, president of Repairers of the Breach, the Reverend William Barber. Reverend Barber, it's great to have you back on the show. So what's the plan today in West Virginia, and what's your specific objection to Senator Manchin here?
Well, first of all, thank you to Joe and all of you who have me on. I would like to say that I'm one of the servants. Really, the leaders are the people from the hollers and the mountains and the hood in Charleston, white, black, Latino, Native, poor and low wealth people who said, come to West Virginia. And they've raised the question, what doth it profit America to hold on to an antiquated, non-constitutional filibuster but to lose the soul of the democracy, to lose the infrastructure of democracy, which is voting, to lose the opportunity to invest in poor and low wealth communities and lift them from the bottom. So they decided we're going to do, in COVID times, a moral motorcade on Manchin on the 100th anniversary of the Blair Mountain War, when miners, black and white, stood against the oppressive forces of their day. They're saying that they're calling on Manchin to end the filibuster, to pass the For the People's Act, because you have to have that to deal with the issues that are going on in state houses today, to pass the Voting Rights Restoration Act, to pass $15 and a living wage, because 350,000 West Virginians make less than a living wage, and to pass a real economic spending plan that lifts poor and low wealth people from the bottom, because poverty is a policy choice. It is not because of the moral inaction of people. And this group of folk, lastly, are showing that this fight for voting rights and fight for economic justice is not just about Jim Crow. It's not just about black people, but it's about white people. 95% of West Virginians are white, and they are upset with the voter suppression that's happening in this state because it hurts poor and low wealth people and harms them and disallows their ability to challenge their politicians.
Reverend Barber, this is Claire McCaskill. First, I have great respect for the work you have done in so many places, or certainly in North Carolina and other places where you have been instrumental in leading movements. But how do you reconcile the vast majority of West Virginians that voted for Donald Trump? And how do we reconcile those numbers with the possibility that any other Democrat could win West Virginia? Is the pressure you're putting on Joe Manchin going to be effective in a state that is so dominated by Republican voters at this juncture in history?
Well, it's also so dominated by a lot of poor and low wealth people that just stopped voting. They stopped voting because a lot of Democrats have refused to go to them. I've been all over this country, to Harlan County. I've been up in the mountains with the mamas of Appalachia, women who literally have to sell tacos on Tuesday to help support the menstrual needs for other women. A lot of them are just turned off because nobody talks to them about poverty and where they really are, and talks about living wages and health care. We did a study with Columbia University called Unleashing the Power of Poor and Low Wealth Voters, and said that in states like West Virginia and across the country in the South, if anywhere from 1 to 25, 30% of poor and low wealth people who have not voted began to vote, if politicians would talk to them, the one reason they said they did not vote is because the politicians don't even say the word poverty. 55% of poor and low wealth people voted for Biden-Harris, but we also know that they have the power. 65 million poor and low wealth people now are eligible to vote, 30% of the electorate. Last election, only 34 million voted. We touched 2.2 million of them in frequent voters, but that left 29 million that did not vote. If the party would start reaching out we would not have to wonder, could we beat a Trump in a West Virginia? Remember, West Virginia has a strong progressive history. That's why 100 years ago, these miners were fighting. The Republicans don't have to win, and you don't have to have moderate Democrats if you awaken this sleeping giant of poor and low-wealth people who are the key to the transformation. And who said this better than me? Dr. King in 1965, at the end of the Selma to Montgomery March, said the great fear of the aristocracy and the greedy elites of this country was for the Negro poor and low-wealth masses and the white poor and low-wealth masses to unite and build a political alliance that could fundamentally change the economic architecture of this country. And that is still true. It's empirically true, and it's possible. That's why what you will see today is this unified group of people coming together and saying to Manchin, you need to stop, but also saying to the House, hold the line. Hold the line, pass all of these things, pass infrastructure, pass the economic plan, pass the living wage, pass the Voting Rights Act, pass the For the People's Act, but don't do some of it, do all of it, and deliver for the people and watch the increased voter turnout that you see.
And that coalition of black working class Americans and white working class Americans, that was the dream of Martin Luther King, the dream of Bobby Kennedy, and the dream that still remains unfulfilled. But Reverend William Barber, thank you so much for being with us as always, and thank you for your great work on the Poor People's Campaign. We so greatly appreciate it.